Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for coming. It's such an honor to have you in our first Style Frame workshop. Just to give you some background, I'm Shaheel, one of the co-founders, and Rishi is my other co-founder at Styleframe. So uh, quick bit of context, we're going to be doing an intro on what Styleframe is, some of the tools, and then Jeffrey has been very kind in sharing his experience using Styleframe, specifically a piece called Survivalist Rizzo Wolf. So it's a screenshot of a hardcore band's t-shirt. He took it through the platform, got it printed on a risograph, scanned it back in, rebuilt all of that in After Effects, and then worked with a sound designer to score the whole thing. And so we found this project to be really exciting because number one, I love how it turned out. I love the look, I love the vibe of it, but I love that he basically did 80 to 85% of it outside of AI and used AI to help him get to his look that he really wanted at the end of the day. And was AI was really a tool within his toolkit to help him develop that look. And so just a little bit about Style Frame. Rishi and I, we started this company almost 4 years ago, and a little bit about our backgrounds. Rishi was a previous member of the technical team at TikTok working on AR effects and camera effects and like the AI cinematography efforts behind CapCut. So he was a creative technologist there and has about a decade of experience in graphics and visual effects and animation. I previously was at the 3D graphics team at Meta Reality Labs, working on a lot of the creator tools for the VR worlds and for a lot of the AR experiences. And previously, Rishi and I, we met at a random kind of party in San Francisco, and we found out that both of our moms are design professors at local universities in the Midwest. Both of our dads were kind of scientists and technologists, so we were always really interested in that intersection of art and technology. And especially when a lot of these AI video and image models came out, we saw that they were being used for kind of consumery things like, oh, turn my family photo into maybe a certain art style or, Ghibli style. But that whole time we were thinking, wouldn't it be great to apply this technology to professionals that are using Illustrator and After Effects and these more advanced tools that are really high level? And how can we add a tool to their toolkit for getting their look faster and really viewing AI as another rendering engine versus something that's going to replace all of your workflows? So it's really great that all of you have shown up today. I think being some of the first artists and motion designers to really learn this new medium is going to put you at a huge advantage for the future and how you're able to manipulate these tools. And Jeff has really become an expert over the last few months working with us and really wielding them and bending them to his will to get his artistic vision across the line. So I'll just share a quick presentation that we've made. Um, Start at the beginning. This is us at Style Frame, and today we'll start with Rishi's demo of the platform, then we'll hand it over to Jeff for his 30-minute run through of his process. And then we have a short recording from a sound designer named Wesley who scored the whole piece. So we'll get to see all of that. But I'll start by sharing screen, by handing it to Rishi, who can share screen and give a quick demo of the platform.
Hey everyone. Yeah, thanks, Shaheel, and good to see you again, Jeff. Uh, what was really interesting when we started getting to kind of tinker with Jeff on some of these tools is the relationship started with we were kind of framing it as like, hey, here's what these tools are capable of, but what did we actually want to implement in terms of art direction? And Jeff, we would be on a call with him. We'd furiously be taking notes on kind of like all the little things he would push and prod on. It should be able to do this, and it should be able to kind of head in that direction. It really helped Shaheel and I frame what this platform should be from the perspective of, for an artist, it should really fit into their workflow. It should accentuate their workflow. There's still some work to be done on that, and I think that's something where we're honestly just scratching the surface and we're going to really be able to accelerate with it. But there is some stuff we're really excited about that we've made a lot of progress on and are ready to kind of, bring that to the world. So I'll go ahead and share my screen to kind of walk you guys through it. And yeah, everyone can see my screen okay? Cool. So how we kind of refer to Styleframe is it's the toolkit for motion designers and animators to leverage video generation and image generation. And that process really kind of goes from when you're in the concepting stage all the way to, as you're determining final pixel, where can these tools help in that process, not necessarily replace that process. And what we've ended up finding is that for folks, it's really great for storyboarding. If you have input frames for a storyboard and you want to control kind of exactly what that visual will look like. It's great for concepting. So if you're working with a client and you have an idea of this is what the ad or this is what the spot's going to look like, and before we go ahead and animate every piece, here's how we kind of got to that point. Nitty-gritty tasks like in-betweening, where you're going ahead and you have a set of frames that you want to work with and want to generate what the sequence or the motion in between is going to look like, so you can bring that back into After Effects. And then just specific keyframing, like I'm picking up a shot and I just need to kind of transition between two elements on a timeline. How am I going to go ahead and piece that together? We see this fitting really into the early part of the workflow where you're concepting, you're thinking through ideas, you've started from sketches, maybe you have some storyboards and you're piecing it together. The other thing we think about a lot is when you're right in the middle, oftentimes what you're trying to accomplish can't be written in words. I think like myself, Shaheel, Jeffrey, we say this pretty constantly where none of us really like prompting or want to prompt. It's not like a natural way to art direct things, but we have references that we've gone ahead and curated or things that we've gone ahead and created that we want to use to go ahead and tie things together. And so when what you want to show is something that it's an effect or it's a process and it's a reference for the motion, how do you kind of tie that into how the artist can actually deal with it? And then all the way to the end, which is, I know exactly what I want this to look like. And as Shaheel said, can it work as the rendering engine for me? So whether I have 2D or 3D animations and I'm changing the style or I'm colorizing the footage or I'm using it to kind of take a play blast render and build some previs out of it, all the way to I have some mixed media footage and I want to, change the styles and then bring that back into After Effects for my compositing workflows and so on. This is kind of the core gambit of what we focus on. As I said, it's just kind of scratching the surface for what's possible. And then you can kind of work your way into, how you use things for prepping keyframes, post-production work for if you want to kind of go ahead and rotoscope elements to bring it back into After Effects, or improve elements so that, they're more ready for final delivery, where you want something in 4K or 8K even, and you can bring it back into your application of choice to piece that together. We're really excited to kind of keep expanding the surface area because I think the more we're able to add to it, the more of an entry point there is to actually use it in your process. But I think one thing that showcases really well how we actually think about, what you're able to do with this is how we actually worked with Jeffrey to build out this interface for in-betweening storyboards and so on. So I'll actually log in and show you that live. Let me just sign into my account. Great. So you can see this example. I'll even just run it from scratch where I have this set of 4 keyframes, or even this example is one I'm always excited about where I'm almost in betweening the frames. You can go and add frames directly here. You can add like up to 9 keyframes to go ahead and work with a really complex storyboard, or if you even just have 2 to start and you want to see what the in-betweens look like, you can run that as well. When I upload my keyframes, so in this case, I'll upload that animatic I have of wanting to between these frames. I can go ahead and click Add Images, and you'll see it allows me to kind of work in this simple mode or this timeline. I'll start simple just to kind of show the process. Once I'm in here, I can go ahead and you don't have to write a prompt per se. I have built the tool in a way where it will read the intention and actually in between the frames. But sometimes it is helpful to go ahead and see how the technology is thinking under the hood. So we have this button where you can go ahead and suggest a prompt, and that'll basically go ahead and it'll write out what will happen in the in-between. So in this case, the skateboarder crouches low and launches upward. She lands smoothly on the ground and rolls forward. That seems pretty reasonable for the animation I'm trying to create. I can render this directly or go ahead and refine it in the timeline directly. So if you've tried any of these tools before, most of them just rely on upload an image, write a prompt, get the video. There's zero control in that. So what we've built basically lets you position exactly when things happen, change when things happen in terms of the language, and add more notes as you hold that process. So maybe I want static camera across the entire realm, and then go ahead and render that out directly. So as I said, this is just the start. We're building tools where you can have more and more control in the process. And the most common thing we see, whether it's a freelancer using the product or even artists at Buck, is a lot of it comes down to look development, right? And how am I kind of going through look development really fast? And even if someone ends up doing something traditional, we notice that like this helps them in the process at least get an idea of what is or isn't going to work well. And we love to see that because it helps us really know like where do we have to push, where do we have to pull on making sure there's more surface area for art directable pieces. And so that's something we're really proud about, but also something where, you know, we're really excited to just keep getting pushed by artists. Like Shaheel and I always say, our goal is to build the most artist-friendly way to go ahead and leverage this technology. And like a big part of that is just talking to artists and making sure that the interfaces actually work for them and give them the controls they're looking for to kind of elevate this technology some more. So yeah, that's a little bit on our end in terms of how we're building things and how the platform works. And yeah, excited to kind of hear more from Jeffrey.
Yeah, great. So I'll just hand it off to you, Jeff, and you have the floor.
All right, awesome. Thanks everybody for coming today. It's going to be a great time, and it's already been a great time hearing, you know, about the platform, the experiences we've had back and forth. Speaking of control, the last several months have been awesome, you know, working with these fellas on bringing new tools, new ways of doing things with the platform for motion designers, animators, illustrators, because there's one thing I always say. I started as a designer, not a motion designer. So it's always been hard for me to generate an idea for motion because my brain has always been from the design side of the house. And so this tool platform has allowed me to do that. And so today I want to share with you a piece that I created with the help of all these amazing people. And really pushed and pulled on these tools to make this and using different AI stacks, different tools, the tool itself. So let's just jump right in. Let me know if everybody can see my screen. Are we good? Can everybody hear me? Okay, awesome.
Yep, here, good to go.
All right, awesome. So what is this? Basically, this is a step-by-step breakdown of how I made the RisoWolf project using AI tools and the tactical Riso process. So obviously, you know, design and animation, you know, is generated from ideation. And so I'm always of someone who is constantly on the search for inspiration and ideation. And if you know anything about me, obviously from all my tattoos, I am into a lot of hardcore stuff. And what I mean by that is that, you know, the early emo scene days. And I took inspiration from that because I was browsing the internet one day and I came across one of my favorite band t-shirts. And I was like, how awesome would this be if we animated it? And so that really got me thinking, especially as I was in this 3-month residency with these awesome folks. And so I was like, okay, can I animate this? And what does that look like through the tactical and the AI lens? So, you know, like I always tell everybody, soak in as much inspiration as you can from all the different sources that you can. So whether that's TV, whether that's movie, whether that's music, whether it's a platform, just kind of soak in as much inspiration as you can. So, you know, how I got started with this is I was like, okay, what does that look like from generating a prompt for this? So, for example, I took the t-shirt design and put it into ChatGPT. I says, okay, generate a prompt for this in terms of how it might be animated. And so, for example, the idea came to mind of, you know, when I saw this image from an art direction standpoint, I was like, okay, what does this say to me? And what do I want to say with the piece? And so, sure, it generated a prompt for me. But then, you know, if you know anything about AI, you're like, okay, it'll generate a prompt for me, sure. But that's where art direction comes into play. And so, for example, you know, when I wanted to get started with this, I had to do some research, you know, and we're going to go back to forwards for a second. the idea came to me, and I talk about ideation. So I've seen things like vintage scan posters from the hardcore days, but also, it's this idea of watching movies too. I got inspiration from 300, and there's a music video out there called Engine 45 by The Ghost Inside. I highly suggest watching it. It's pretty awesome. There's a wolf in it, obviously, but I had to get started with the art direction. So I did a little bit of research into like old scan posters, even creating a style frame of my own from the reference. So then I had all my stuff as per se from an art direction standpoint and what I wanted to say with this. And so, I asked it, it will also the platform will generate a prompt for you. But I used that from the ChatGPT, and it didn't really animate the wolves in the way that I wanted. So then I took it and I said, hey, okay, just generate it and animate it. Simple. Sorry. So, we had this conversation plenty of times where, how does the platform work when you generate? Can it generate something that's 50 to 60% of the way there that you need it to be? So in this instance, when I used the ChatGPT reference, it really didn't animate it the way I needed it to. And if you look inside, when you get these files, when we hand them off to you, you'll see that there's a lot of generations in there that really didn't make it to the final cut. And, art direction is always about curating inspiration. And so the one thing I really love about the platform is the fact that I used it as a tool to help get me inspired. And so I would generate, during my time there, I would generate a lot of references and feeding my animations to the platform in a way that will help me inspire me and get me inspired in how I might animate something. So for example, with the wolf, when I fed it through the system, it wasn't the way I needed it to, but then I just took it and I simplified the prompt. I said, hey, just animate this for me. No, I don't want the camera to change at all. And then boom. And for example, when you see these references, you'll see that there's a few of them. And there's one that I particularly picked after doing all my research. So after I got everything kind of narrowed down in terms of art direction, I was like, okay, it's time to get shit moving. Sorry, pardon my French. So this process and these ways that I do things are, just kind of rebel-like in a way. So with the platform, when you generate an idea or you generate a video, you are allowed to download the image sequence for that video. And once you start using the platform, you'll see that you can download the image sequence and it will give you all the individual PNGs for that sequence. So what I then did is I was like, okay, how do I cut these things apart? How do I start making stuff? And so, I tried Mocha, I tried Photoshop, but I ended up settling on Procreate because it was just faster for me to use the pen tool to cut the wolf out of the background of the reference video that I generated. And so as you can see here in our example, I basically went through each frame, and you will see these in the download files as well. I just cut out each thing, and there's about like 19 to 20 frames. And then I cut out each one, and I half-toned it using the half-toning feature in Procreate. So basically then it was about cleaning up. So I took it into Photoshop here, and I used a separate tool called Glitchy 3D Dither. It's a platform, you can Google it, but I basically took each one of those PNGs and I ran it back through, and then I layered it in Photoshop, and I combined my pixelated version from Procreate back into the dithered versions that I generated from this platform. And so then I imported everything back to After Effects and then lowered the comp rate, which allowed me to get the look and feel that I was going for in terms of a stop motion, gritty, grimy vibe. Because if you know anything about like, it wouldn't have really felt natural to have them and fighting each other really fast, because it gives that grittier vibe, I would say. So the next step, obviously, once I had locked in my wools, was to get the grass moving. So there was a really great reference that I had pulled from one of the videos that I generated of the grass swaying back and forth. And I was like, okay, well, I tried many ways to kind of extract it. I used the platform a little bit. There's an awesome extraction or image retoucher remover tool that they have in the platform that allows you to remove things. So I ended up going with that. I had pulled a steal from the video that I had referenced, removed some additional side stuff from the wools moving out of the scene. And I was like, okay, I've got my static grass. I want to get it moving though. So I ended up going over to Runway. So I have multiple AI stacks. And so there's a term that, my buddy from Pixel Park, Matt, he mentioned that, several years back, he mentioned the tool of using AI stacks. So just having different AI tools in your toolkit. So I've experimented with those over the last few years. So basically, I just used that and said, Runway, animate this swaying back and forth. So I also use chat as well to generate prompts and stuff like that. So once we had the grass moving, it was all about compositing everything back together in After Effects and adding secondary or tertiary elements. So I wanted, keep in mind, as I'm doing all this, I'm still art directing and adding that human touch to things to make things work and feel the way I need them to from an art direction standpoint. So basically, I just went into, CC Rainfall. I use plugins like Time Machine, RXRR, and all of those can be found on AE Scripts. So it's just about going into After Effects, knowing the plugins that I like to play around with. And that's my next piece of advice too. It's like to continue playing with plugins and use them in ways that get your mind thinking. So now we're ready for print. Once everything is kind of animated and ready, well, how do I get this thing moved over to Risograph? And so basically, you save everything out as individual PNG sequences. So your grass layer, your wolves, your rain, and you just save them and render them out as separate PNGs. And so it's time to print now. So what do? We have all these individual PNG sequences. What do I do with them? So the Risograph / print process is pretty easy. So basically what you'll do, and you can Google this. I won't cover that today because it's a pretty detailed process, but you can go and Google Kelly Anderson Risograph. And she'll cover quite a bit of information on. There's also a Risograph animation book out there. I probably have it somewhere over here, but doing the contact sheets is pretty simple. You just open up Photoshop and you go on the left side, files, and it'll generate a contact sheet. So what a contact sheet is it takes all your images and puts them in a sequence on whatever size document you need them to be. And as you can see, for example, they're on here on the left. So you print those out and then you scan them back in. So this is where the human touch comes into play. So the most important part that I like to tell people is scan things in at a higher resolution. So sometimes I think I scan these in as a 1200 DPI. When you scan things in that high res, you get as much grit and grain as you can on these things. And sometimes you might want to scan them in at 600 DPI. And my next piece of advice too is get a software like ViewScan. ViewScan will allow you to have more control over your scanning and documentation. The typical software is great, but ViewScan does a really good job. So I then composited all these things in after I scanned them. And then basically what you do is you take your final animation, you put it on the bottom of your timeline, and then you basically go frame by frame and toggle hold keyframe all your scans on top of your original animation, frame by frame, and put them in order. So it's great to put numbered pages on those pages, so that way you know, okay, page 1 through 12 frames, and you just go and you align them again, as you can see in the picture here. So the final thing that I did for this was I was like, okay, we need some really great sound. So I reached out to Wesley, and I wanted to bring the AI thing back into, since this was through the AI lens. I was asking Wesley, I was like, hey, would you be okay to kind of vibe on something that would be AI driven? So me and Wesley went back and forth. I even created a small little tool using AI to help me buffer. I call it buffer lag, but basically it was an experimental decay kind of, because I wanted the audio to be decayed. I wanted to have a little bit of noise to it. And this is all the time me art directing not only the printing, the design, the animation, but also the sound a little bit. And so once I got that finished, I reached out to Wesley and said, hey, let's jam. So Wesley sent over some stems, and then he was like, I was inspired by some like vintage hardcore stuff, and I didn't even tell him about the project at this point. Wesley was just like, okay, I'm vibing on what this is, and he kind of picked up on that vibe. So with that being said, thank y'all so much. I'm going to kick it back over so we can hear from Wesley on kind of where he went with the AI and the sound design with everything. Thank y'all so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. So I'll just go ahead and share my screen. Yeah, definitely applause for Jeff. He was awesome to work with these past 3 months, and I think that turned out so well. So I'll just share my screen and show Wesley's portion of the demo. Can everyone see this? And hopefully you can hear that too. Oh, you can't hear it. Okay. Let me figure this out. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I think it has something to do with sharing settings. Okay. Also share tab audio. Share. Okay, Chrome tab. So we'll do this. Share. Sweet. So hopefully you can hear it when this plays.
I run a small sound and music design studio called Sanctus Audio. So Jeffrey and Shaheel invited me to talk a little bit about the sound that I did for Jeffrey's Survivalist project. That was something that came together really quickly, and there's really not a whole lot to say in terms of process, but I think maybe it's interesting, just kind of as I think a lot of us are figuring out how to use AI tools in our work and different ways to do that. I'll just kind of share about this experiment from an audio perspective. So Jeffrey reached out about this and kind of talking about the way that he was interacting with Styleframe, taking influences, using AI, creating things himself. So I wanted to do something kind of similar, and I've been kind of messing around with different tools to see what they could do. So I opened up Suno, which is music generation. You can prompt it, and it will spit out a song. So the thing that I wanted to try was that there were these, wolves, but there's kind of this uncanny quality to it, and it reminded me a lot of like a hardcore band poster. And Jeffrey and I had talked even before about how both of us enjoy heavy music. So I thought, okay, I want to do something with that. But I want to use Suno to make something you couldn't otherwise make. Because I could go, Suno, make a hardcore song, blah, blah, blah. And it's going to sound like a probably kind of bad, generic hardcore song. It's not going to have any soul to it. I want to do something weird. So I chose to upload kind of some wolf sounds that I had curated and edited together. I was going to show you generating, but for whatever reason, when I upload the wolf sounds, Suno is telling me it has copyrighted lyrics. So I don't Suffice to say, I uploaded the wolf audio as like our reference. So typically that would be another song that you would want to do like a cover of or something like that. And then I prompted it with a bunch of different things that were kind of in that hardcore heavy music space just to see what I could get it to do. And the key thing is that I cranked up the weirdness and I cranked up the style influence. And really what I was looking for is like, how do I get it to give me wolf sounds that get kind of mutated and blended with like electric guitars and drums and hardcore music sounds in a way that would just be impossible to make any other way. No, I didn't want them to be layered. I didn't want it to sound like a band with a wolf. I wanted it to sound like what happens if like the wolf has a guitar kind of as part of its DNA. And so created a lot of weird sounds that way. And it took a lot of experimentation because, you know, so many ways when you're doing something like this, you're rolling the dice to see what it does. So I recorded a bunch of material and then I brought it over into Pro Tools to really try to curate it and turn it into something. Because I ended up with stuff like, let's see what this one sounds like. Ah, it's beautiful. But yeah, so this is something interesting that I found was like, you know, it's trying to predict what the waveform should do. So oftentimes, especially when you crank up the weirdness, the algorithm sort of gets lost and it starts to become just weirder and weirder. And so that was something that was useful, is to kind of know that like, okay, I can look towards the end for the really weird stuff. So I really like how that sounds because, I mean, one, it is like pretty abrasive, but I like the way that it sounds uncanny. It sounds like wolves, but it doesn't exactly sound like wolves, and it sounds very lo-fi, which I feel like matches the aesthetics of the visual. So I started just cutting up bits and pieces and decided I wanted to do kind of like a slow deathcore breakdown kind of an idea with it, and just go as hard and over the top as possible. So here's what I came up with. So pretty gnarly stuff. So anyway, I took that, I sent it over to Jeffrey, and I said, hey, this is a lot, but here's kind of the process, here's the idea, here's a bunch of the raw assets of what I made. And then he took it from there. He actually took it and started like reworking it in other ways. And I appreciated that because, I don't know, there's a lot of discourse around AI and art. And I think one of the major things that's lacking in these, you know, simple, if you prompt AI algorithm, tell it to make art, there's not a perspective to it. But with this project, Jeffrey and I have that history. We had like connotation. We've been to hardcore music shows. We had talked about that together and shared that lived experience. And so that's kind of where I felt like this was kind of interesting to go, okay, you know, we use these tools to make the sounds, but we're bringing in also our perspective, and it's enabling us to do something we otherwise wouldn't have been able to do.
Awesome. That was amazing. That was so good from both Jeff and Wesley. Just that collaboration couldn't have turned out better. So just to cap things off here, share my screen one last time. And so now we're moving on to the Q&A. So anything people want to ask about, feel free to. I think we have 20 minutes to do Q&A. But just before that, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or Jeffrey or Wesley. If you connect with me, you'll see a lot more about Styleframe, and I'll do a post about this whole workshop right after this. And for joining us today, we wanted to also give attendees 30% off Styleframe. So if you want to get started, you can use code WOLF, and I'll also send an email after this with a direct link that'll take you to our platform. So yeah, thanks again, Jeffrey. Congrats and great job to you and Wesley. And let's open it up to any questions folks might have.
Cody, I'm gonna nominate you.
No, I mean, I don't really have any questions. It's cool to see your process, though. Yeah, I've never done any risograph stuff, so being able to like see how some of that works, that's really cool to me. And then yeah, I've thought of like the process of like, or the aspect of like an AI stack before, so I haven't done a whole lot with it yet, but anyway, just to like see a use case like that, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think once you get your hands on the files and you dig into it, because it's a full breakdown, you'll see that like
sorry, Jeff, just to interrupt you. Cody, I think if you go on mute, then there won't be reverb.
Oh, there's a reverb. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. No worries. What I was gonna say is exactly, Cody. Like, I think that like I've been recently just diving into a lot of Risograph stuff because I've been working with a local Risograph. Shout out to Roundabout Rizzo here in Raleigh. But he's got me thinking about different methods. And so the one thing I forgot to mention was that like you have full control of how that Riso looks even after it's printed. You can add more like plugins and looks and feels to those printed layers, which even makes it even more, you're pushing it even farther away from what it was intended from an AI perspective. And that's why I included that the label, the human touch, because anything with Riso obviously is done by hand because it's printed. And while this might not be the full Risograph experience, it is the same process. And being able to have that in your toolkit, we could remove the whole AI thing entirely, and this could just be an animated project. But it's still the idea of like Wesley said, making something that might have never been able to be made, but have our perspectives added to it and emphasize it a little more. And so I'm excited for y'all to dig into those files and maybe take these processes and use them as your own, or even make Risograph stuff, or partner with a Risograph printer to make some animated projects, or even do it at home. And in those files, you can kind of see how I broke things down. And, while I didn't possibly show you that, you can see that when you have to open up the After Effects files, you can see how I did things. And you even open up the Procreate file and see how I did that too. So excited for you to kind of dig into that stuff and see that. Because one thing that I've been very passionate about from the Gunner School thing is sharing those resources with people so they can get inspired. And because we used to have this thing back in my day, I sound old right now, we used to have hold frame, right? And hold frame is where I cut my teeth, figuratively, learning those tools and those animation techniques. So excited to give something back. And I was kind of nervous making this. I'm glad that they pushed me to make something like this to give out to the community.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for that, Jeffrey. And Shannon, I know you unmuted for a second there too.
Yeah, probably a future thing, but I was just curious if you were ever interested in like different file formats, more like a vector or a 3D, like that kind of generation. I don't know if that's even possible, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, from our end, that's definitely a possibility. Where we actually started was all in vector generation and transformation. So like the first tool we ever made was a Figma plugin that took all of your vectors and turned them into either motion graphics or going from different styles, like from 2D to 3D, and adding different effects like a balloon effect, that sort of thing. So it's been kind of fun because our app has come full circle where now this works for any type of image and video. But once again, all those file formats will definitely be back.
I've got a question. So what's next for Styleframe there, friend? What's next?
Yeah,
Yeah.
great question, man. So now we have our core set of tools from frames to video for, storyboard to animatic type concepting, then something with a little bit more control like motion references for repeatable procedural tasks. And then for more final pixel things with exact control, we have our Restyle video tool. But we have a whole gamut of new tools that are coming out. We'll be releasing a bunch of different shaders and effects like the dither effect and like a Rizzo style effect and the ability for people to bring in their own effects. We're launching a video to layers tool shortly. So you'll be able to do video generation and actually break it up into layers that you can export right back into After Effects or your program of choice. That's going to be pretty sweet. One of the another tools we're working on is more of like a script or concept to animation. So even just uploading a rough storyboard with handwritten notes on it as well as rough sketches and drawings that'll actually generate the video of that concept that you're bringing in, whether it's character sheets, whether it's just like a 20-page script, any sorts of things, any combination of those things too. So just building out much more of our suite of tools from concept all the way to final pixel.
Right on, right on. Does anybody foresee this being a tool? Because I've had the pleasure of working with the tool myself for several months. Does anybody kind of get inspired from seeing kind of some of how these tools work and play, about how they could fit into their workflow, how it might not fit into their workflow? Just any ideas on how they might be able to use it in the future in their stuff?
I know that I'm terrible at perspective, so being able to draw like a start and end frame and have something move in space, even if I don't use it as like the final product, just having something be like, okay, this turns in this direction at this angle would be helpful for my brain.
That's awesome to hear. You should definitely check out not only our frames to video tool, which does that keyframe in betweening process, but also with motion references, a lot of folks are using it to create, rough 360 turntable style rotation animations and that sort of thing, where we're doing that in betweening and you're able to actually generate those frames in context and pull each of them out for your own storyboarding or concepting process as well.
The other thing I wanted to add about the platform, and this is just my unique perspective, is that especially as someone who is in the middle of nowhere, the tool has been a design-friendly friend. It's been someone that I can ask it, not really ask it questions, but generate ideas and help me kind of jumpstart my ideas. And using chat as well. Chat only tells you what you want to hear, but the cool thing about the platform, especially from a previz, Cody, it was a pleasure, my friend. We will see you soon. I'll hit you up shortly.
Didn't want to
Thanks for
interrupt.
joining, Cody.
Bye,
It's
y'all.
all good. No worries. What I was gonna say is, like, especially in those previous, those early days, especially as someone who's just starting out, I want to throw Yareli into this. Me and Yareli have talked several times that some of the hardest parts are like storyboarding and the previz and getting some of that stuff out the door early. I even struggle with that a little bit, especially as you start to turn written word into visual form. And, especially with the tools you're talking about coming soon, it'll be easier for me to kind of just have something that I can work with. And we've used this several times over the last several months, just jump starting that idea. A lot of times I don't have someone around me here to help me figure out what this thing might do. And so that's where I want to give shout out to the platform and y'all for creating something that just generally helps me and doesn't steal my artwork in a way. I know that was one of the big things that everybody's kind of worried about, but I think here, and the reason why I wanted to share this with people is that recently we started digging back into some old work that I did in college. And I know there's some SCAD alum here in the call. some of the work that I did while I was a SCAD as a student, I didn't think was that great. But I have a fondness for that stuff that I did back then. And we've recently been feeding that to the platform and saying, hey, what would this be if it was animated? And so there was some really great, especially with some of the updates that Shaheel and the team were doing, really got me jump started on some of this old stuff and bringing it to life. So I encourage you to think about that too, as you have some of this old stuff. You're like, hey, can this be something? And the platform will help you generate some ideas and get the old noggin moving, I guess. Sorry, I didn't mean to take up the bandwidth.
No, I love that. And I think that's part of our take on AI right now is like, how can you use it for look dev and concepting to get to your look faster and your ideas faster? But then once you're there, go through the pretty intensive process that you just kind of outlined there, where it's very manual, very artistically driven, and takes like full precision.
Right on, right on.
Catherine, did you have a question?
Yeah, I kind of just wanted to like piggyback on what Jeff was saying. Like, as like a SCAD student currently, I'm about to graduate, and just like seeing my peers and like how like I know, especially in motion media, like people are more like welcoming about the idea of experimenting with AI, but outside of that major, I feel like people are still very wary of it. And just like how Jeff, how you were saying how you're using chat to kind of initially like start your ideation, and how like it came out with these very generic stuff, and like you have to like keep working with it, and how Styleframe, it's like you could like have all these layers. There's like so much more to it than like I feel like some other AI models now, where it's like here it gives you one product versus like I'm really excited to experiment with Styleframe, just being able to like it feels more like an alternative art process like glitch art, and you kind of let it take the reins, but then you can like steer it into the direction you want to. So I really appreciate that as someone that's learning.
Yeah, I think that Shaheel and the team really sold me on the platform when I joined them a few months ago. And while I wanted to kind of bring some of these more industry niche things like layers, like art direction tools that you can write on top of things. Like Free.io has that where you can draw on stuff and give direction and notes. There's a lot of things that we had talked about during our residency together. But it was the idea that this is a tool for motion designers, a tool for the industry that nobody else. And I think they found their niche where people like us have tools that are built specifically for us, with us in mind, with love in mind, and so that's what I want to give them their flowers about. Is like, as I went through and played with this platform, the tools, like it just feels like something that fits into my workflow, if that makes sense. And I hope that other people, if will jump on board and use these tools and figure out different workflows, different from mine, and really share some of that stuff with the community. So I'm going to kick it back over to Shaheel. I don't want to take up too much more time, but thank y'all again.
Appreciate it. And it's just so fun getting to work with artists like Jeffrey and like you all, where he's doing things with the tool that we could have never seen coming. Like we could have never imagined some of the use cases and some of the inventive art that he's been able to do with the platform. So likewise, we've been equally influenced, and we're so grateful to get to work with you on this.
One final surprise. Obviously, you mentioned it in your email, but I know a lot of the people who signed up obviously will get a bunch of free stuff. You want to kind of tell them about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So after this, I'll be sending out a recording of this chat, and you're welcome to forward it to anyone that you think might like it as well. And then on top of that, all of the assets that Jeffrey made for this workshop, he's willing to share with everyone. So that was a really generous gift from him, and you'll get a poke through everything and get a look behind the scenes of an amazing artist and his vision as he was working through everything, all of his After Effects files, and those are all templates for you all. And then aside from that, we'll be giving 30% off Styleframe at the lowest possible price. So I think getting started with, thanks Marsh for joining. I think getting started with Styleframe will be like $6 now with the link from this workshop. So hopefully we'll be a little bit more accessible for everyone. And yeah, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Have a great rest of your week. Talk soon, hopefully.
Bye.
Bye.